So we are starting a series today titled Unplugged, Staying Rooted in Christ in the Age of Technology. That ironically, the image up there was created using technology. The ability for us to even see the words on the screen is because of a thanks to technology. The fact that people can join us from anywhere through the live stream is because of technology. And quite frankly, the fact that there are instruments is because of technology. Throughout this series, we will look at different types of technology, ways that we understand and use technology. And we're going to turn to the scriptures to see if the scriptures can provide some guidance in a time that there was very limited types of technology, but to see if the scriptures can help give guidance in how it is that we can be more judicious in our choices we make around technology. As you already got a little preview to in our reading through Mark, one of my favorite practices to do at Lent is to read one of the entire Gospels during Lent. Luke is a great one because there's 6 weeks of Lent, and there's 24 chapters in Luke, so it's 4 chapters a week, and it lines up really nicely. Instead, I chose to do Mark. It actually Mark's the shortest. And also, as I was preparing for the sermon series, I sat down, I was drawn to Mark, and I sat down, and I read through Mark. It's like 16 chapters. It really is the shortest gospel, very brief. And so as I read through the book of Mark, I pulled out different scriptures that I was like, oh, I'm really drawn to some of these scriptures, and I think that these will align nicely with some of what we want to talk about in technology. Our opening scripture comes from Mark chapter 2, verses 23 to 28. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food? How he entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and he gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, 'The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord over even the Sabbath.'" What was the law about the Sabbath during this time? Could you work at all? No, you could not work at all. In the way of food preparation, they would do food preparation the day before so that they could rest on the Sabbath, and cooking at that point was considered work. So what is it that the disciples did here that was considered work and was breaking the law of the Sabbath? Harvesting grain, which the way this is written, I literally imagine them walking along and literally just like picking, like not even doing that much work, but even that much would have been considered work. So in this situation, how does Jesus respond to the Pharisees who are criticizing the disciples' work of picking grain on the Sabbath? The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. And that's going to be our focus for our sermon today. We can trace the origins of the Sabbath back to how early? Creation. God created the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. In the 10 Commandments, thou shalt keep the Sabbath holy. We move up to Hebrews now after a time of Jesus, but in Hebrews, then it says, so then a Sabbath rest still remains for the people of God. For those who enter God's rest also rest from their labors as God did from his, making that clear connection to creation. So I'm going to adjust a little bit the some of the a question. So instead of just what is it that was you were allowed or not allowed to do on the Sabbath, I want to ask a different question. What is the purpose then of resting on the Sabbath? What is the purpose of the Sabbath? To focus on God? What else? Restore your strength. Rest. Like rest actually having a purpose. I think I've said it before down here. I'm sure I have. But in our society, what happens if you're resting for too long? What are you called? Lazy. Or a parent. Or, well, no, not a parent. You are not a parent. You are not called a parent if you're resting for very long. Sorry, rephrase on that. I think that as soon as you become a parent, the idea of rest is that I got to go to the grocery store all by myself. Especially at this time. Or rest is when 2 of your 3 kids are not in the household. Rest, though, here, I'm thinking not just rest, but even what is the purpose of rest? Restoration. You're restoring your mind, body, and, of course, in spending time with God, you're restoring your mind, body, and soul. So Jesus interprets this law for them, stating that the Sabbath was made for humankind. It's made for people to restore their mind, body, and soul. And it is not necessarily for humans to keep the Sabbath just to appease a law. Now, I can never remember this number. I don't know if it's 613 is the number that jumps out to me, but I think that's wrong. How many laws were there between Deuteronomy and Leviticus? It feels like a billion. Especially for a culture that couldn't actually read, where the majority of people couldn't read. They would have had to, I don't even know how you memorize all of those different laws. Now, granted, they understood things differently then. But they're at a time here where there were over 600 laws that they were supposed to be keeping, and the Sabbath law being one of them. But how much is it that some of the laws were made to help? Or at least in their original creation, they were made to help people. Is there a benefit of keeping the Sabbath and resting? Very much so. Made to help humans. However, what was happening with the Pharisees here? Sometimes the laws are being used in a legalistic way of you must follow the law or you cannot commune with God, essentially, or you cannot have access to God. So I want to go back. What's the purpose of the Sabbath? The Sabbath is for people. Let's look at the disciples here. The disciples are traveling. The disciples are hungry. The disciples are walking past grain fields. What do you think is better? To pluck a couple heads of grain or to go hungry? Which do you think is actually helping restore the body, mind, and soul? Pluck a couple pieces of grain to be able to eat. So I have one more question before we move off of Sabbath, kind of connected to Sabbath. What is the purpose of rules and laws? We're going to adjust because this is part of the law for Jewish people. What is the purpose of rules and laws? So expanding beyond Sabbath. To keep order, keep people safe, control, to guide, to balance rights and needs. I like a lot of the things you guys are saying. So partially these can fit in with some of these, but I was thinking that rules and laws are to keep us safe. I had that one. The order one, I had so society can function effectively and efficiently. I'm a social psychologist, so that comes out there. And ultimately, rules and laws are supposed to make people's lives better. Yes? So I think about this with kids. Because boy, I didn't realize until having kids how many rules actually feel kind of arbitrary. like, do we hold this? And then the question comes with the negotiation that goes in your brain, at least in my brain, of do I hold this rule because it's worth holding and keeping them safe, or am I trying to hold this rule because it's just what's always been done? I don't know about you, Alicia, with your kids similar in age, but meal times, I think, are one of the hardest times for young kids. Please tell me it gets better. Okay. One over there is shaking their head yes, one is shaking their head no. That's not helpful. But I will say that there's an aspect of walking around while eating is not the safest choice for a 4-year-old who trips over his own 2 feet. But boy, is it a challenge to keep them with their butt on the seat. And so then the question becomes, do we just let them stand at the table? Is the rule to sit at the table actually a necessary rule? Or is it just because that's how society always functions? At some point you'll learn that you should sit, and you'll choose to sit on your own. I don't know. That's one of the ones I kind of come back and forth to. We kind of move around on that one. Anyway. The Sabbath was made for humans' lives to be better, not to create hardship. Technology, I would argue, was made to make humans' lives better, not to make it worse. So let's pivot and look at technology. What is the purpose of technology? Convenience. A microwave makes it much more. My microwave has been broken for a little bit. It kind of works and it kind of shuts off in the middle of heating up. So yeah, convenience, speed, and not making as many dirty dishes. But yeah, what else? Efficiency. Make things more efficient. I think of my dishwasher. That's very quiet and efficient and doesn't use a lot of electricity or a lot of water. What else? What is the purpose of technology? Help us connect with other people. Access to information. Free up time. Give us more time. Entertainment. Allow us to have something that we enjoy. It's supposed to improve our health through advances in medicine, advances in science, my wonderful Apple Watch that tells me how many steps I get and whether or not I've closed my move goal, and whether or not that's supposed to help motivate me to actually close my move goal. That motivation stopped a while ago. Make us more mobile. Oh, even just thinking about cars, right? Like, I think Cody's mom has talked before about like whenever it was like 81, there was hardly any cars on 81, and how long it would take because cars didn't go as fast as they do now to get up to like Carlisle area, and that was a big trip. How much has that changed? Make us more mobile. Lucky them. Yeah, to take that, to go on a cruise, to be able to just go, to hop on a plane and go across the ocean, right? Make us more mobile. Lots of benefits. Lots of different types of technology. I still think about I don't know what would ever happen if my fridge if we ever lost electricity, and how it is that we preserve meat. My grandfather used to tell stories about having a meat cellar and going down and cutting off a chunk of meat, a chunk of pork, and slathering it up with some more salt, right, to help cure it. I have that. I don't know how to do it. Like, if we ever lose electricity, the electrical grid, like, I don't know how to maintain meat like that. Like, there's so much that's lost in that. I got a fun fact about that then, by the way. But When I'm talking about technology for this series, am I thinking about refrigerators and the ease that has come with them? Not really. When I'm thinking about our phones, computers, TV, internet, social media, movies, anything in that way. And even this type of technology is supposed to help us have better lives, give us entertainment, help us rest, help us stay connected with each other. But I would argue that while this technology has made some parts of our lives better, it has also become a bit of a problem. And so I ask the question of, has it made our lives worse? In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. So I'm going to talk about probably the dreaded form of social media, and that's Facebook. We're going to do a history lesson, though, with it. What was the original purpose of Facebook? To connect college students. Cody, Alicia, Julie, and I were all in it was my senior year that Facebook was created. It was originally for college students to stay connected. Oh, and we had MySpace before, and then of course you had your AOL Messenger, and yeah. Then you got Facebook. Facebook at least is still active though, but boy has its purpose changed. Is it the central place for college students anymore? No. It's what? For grandparents. So I wrote middle and older adults, right, are now probably the primary users of Facebook. And is it for them to stay connected with each other? That's for ads. Oh, yes. Oh. Did you say vent their spleen? Oh my word, vent their spleen. I need to pocket that phrase. But how much has it just become a place to disseminate information, whether or not that information is accurate, and whether or not that information is being relayed in a way that is nice? My question is, how much has, in the way that has changed, does that actually make our lives better or make our lives worse? Instead, we're now in this point, and we'll talk about this probably more next week, we're in this point that we have to question everything we see and read. And that's the focus of this sermon, right? Or this series. How is it that we choose to use it? Where are we making judgments? Where are we looking at this and going, is this, and I'm going to come back to this question. I love this phrasing that Jesus says of, does the Sabbath was made for humankind, not humankind for the Sabbath. Technology was made for humankind, not humankind for technology. And now, especially when you bring money into it as well, how much of it that we are now just in the ads and everything, the target for technology. And so how do we flip that script, and how do we make judicious choices? As the working group was meeting, talking about this series, we thought about the movie WALL-E. Some of you, it sounds like most people have seen this movie, but in the movie WALL-E, these people have had to leave Earth because Earth was no longer inhabitable, so they're up in space, and in space they have these technologies that are present, and one of those being a motorized hover chair that takes them everywhere they need to go with a screen in their face all the time. Now, there's a part of me that's never like the doom and gloom, right? Of like, oh my God, like, oh my gosh, that's not gonna happen. But the other side of that, I was walking down the hall the other day and I passed 3 separate people in the hall who were like this, in their phone. So like the idea of going around on a hover chair all the time with a screen in front of you, maybe it's not so doom and gloom, like in the sense of unrealistic. We'll actually watch a clip from WALL-E in an upcoming sermon, but there's one picture from WALL-E that I want to highlight, and that's kind of looking at the implications of technology. In how is it, while we do question, may question, how does it make our life better or worse, sometimes we can't see it until we've made it pretty far down the line in how we've been using technology. Would anyone have actually foreseen how Facebook could make our life worse when it was first created? Probably not. So the picture that I want to show is from the captain's area, and he has multiple pictures of captains over the years. Let's go ahead and pull up the picture. And what happens to the captains? They get larger because they're not moving, but the problem is it just that they're getting larger, or is it that their bone structure is changing? They can no longer walk easily. Literally, someone falls out of the chair in the clip that we'll end up watching, but someone falls out of the chair and they can't get back in because their bone structure has changed. Their actual physical structure has changed because of technology. So something that should benefit us is now making our lives worse, at least in this movie. So during this Lenten season, we're going to be doing this thoughtful examination of technology, trying to identify what of technology in our lives is making our lives better or worse. So on Ash Wednesday, if you decide to read along, the very first reading is about Jesus fasting in the desert. It's not a very long description of it, but that's the very first reading. And I want you, between now and Wednesday, to consider, is there a part of technology you would be willing to fast from? Is there something in technology that you would be willing to go, for the Lenten season, I am not going to do this behavior? They say that it's good to not be on your phone an hour before bed because of the blue light. So maybe you could choose that. I'm not going to be on my phone an hour before bed. It improves my sleep, and it helps me create some boundaries. Maybe it's that you choose to give up one form of social media for the entire Lent. Or, thinking about your own habits, if you're somebody who gets email notifications from work on your phone, but maybe you don't actually have to. Maybe you mute your notifications at 5 p.m. each day, so you don't actually get those at home. Or maybe flip the script. Instead of losing something, make intentional choices in the opposite. Maybe if you're thinking about opening your phone and playing a game, maybe choose to play a game with a person. I've been half tempted. I don't think I will actually do this because I don't ever see anybody on them in here anyway, so it's not a big deal, but I've been half tempted to have like a actual like offering at the back where people give their phone at the beginning of service, that you just at least have that visual separate. It's not actually relevant here, but they've done that before in youth group. To have the students say, okay, during this time, this is where I am engaged. Maybe not here, but maybe do that at the dinner table. When you sit down to eat with someone, leave the phones in a separate room. Think about what is it in technology that actually makes your life worse. Don't just choose something for the sake of choosing something. What actually makes your life worse with technology? And what is a way that you could fast from that part during this Lenten season? We have, for during the last song,